Moving on to part 2 of MLA Style. When do you cite? You should always cite anything that was not your original thoughts or words. Believe it or not, ideas are considered property in the United States, so you have to give credit where credit is due. If you didn't say it, cite it. If it's not your original idea, cite it. There are exceptions, of course, to this rule, and the main exception of that would be what we call common knowledge. Common knowledge does not need to be cited, and here's some examples of that. So standard information, like major facts of history or other known facts. For example, the dates of World War II. You could type in Google right now, dates of World War II, and that's going to come up for you, as well as going into any history book and you'll find that same information. How many chromosomes humans have? You could type that in online right now and come up with the answer, as well as any biology book will contain that information as well. So that would be considered standard information. Folk literature, so maybe if you're referring to like the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty. So if you're just referring to a fairy tale, folk literature, just referencing it as like mentioning it as a name or part of the story, then you wouldn't have to cite that specifically unless you are citing word for word anything, any particular character or whatnot says within it, then you would have to cite that. Common sense observations is something that you might observe in public or just know as like a known fact, known observation that you can make. The example here most people know, such as that inflation is most troublesome for people with low and fixed incomes. Known phrases, proverbs, home is where the heart is, don't judge a book by its cover. Things that you've probably heard a million times over said. You don't necessarily have to cite that unless it is like known by a specific author. But any known phrases, proverbs are usually good without citation. If you are worried at any point though, and you're thinking, I don't know if this is common knowledge or not, then the easiest way to do it is just go ahead and cite it. The worst I could say is that, oops, you didn't need to cite that, you were good. It was known as common knowledge. So if you're unsure or cannot ask, just go ahead and cite it to cover yourself so that you avoid plagiarism. Otherwise, you can go with just this common knowledge, the basics that you have here, and then of course you can always ask. What about statistics and data? Can that be common knowledge? Yes, you need to cite that as well. They are not common knowledge. They originated from someone else, so they must be given credit. So statistics and data were gathered from somewhere, either by a group or a specific person, so definitely making sure to give credit for that as well. There are 3 different types of citation, and those being quotation, paraphrase, and summary. Every single one of them, you have to make sure that you are citing them, though, as well. So using an in-text citation, as well as then the works cited page follow-up. So basically then the breakdown of these each. A summary is usually a much shorter version of an original paragraph or a longer passage. The summary should capture the main idea of that longer paragraph or passage. So maybe you have a specific chapter in a book that you are referring to and you're summarizing basically what happened within that. That information, that idea, that chapter was still not your words. So even though you're summarizing, you still have to summarize where that information came from. So at the end of either the paragraph or the few sentences that you use to summarize that, in parentheses, you would still put the information, which would be either the author's last name or the title, the page number of the paragraph in which this information came from. Paraphrasing then is to craft a restatement in your own words of what an original source is saying. You are examining a paragraph or a passage and finding a way to accurately capture the original words in a different way. So here's what we have to be careful with as well. We may not be quoting word for word what they're saying, or maybe using a few of their words. If you use the same exact 4 words in the same order that another source uses, especially if it's a source that's related to what you are writing about, that can be considered plagiarism. So this is where we have to make sure to cover ourselves by, at the end of our paraphrase, in parentheses, put that information. Cite it. When should you quote? So you should quote when the source says something that you don't feel that you can put in your own words better. You should also quote when you want to analyze or emphasize a particular passage within the source and the exact words the author is trying to get across. So this is where you would put quotes where it starts and quotes where it ends, and then at the end of that sentence in parentheses, and you put where that information came from. Cite it. In every single one of these three, so summary, paraphrasing, and quote, you have to make sure that you provide an in-text citation for them. If not, then you are at risk for plagiarism. So make sure you cover yourself and cite them all.